Pathetic girl, you were never the smart one. My dad reminded me. Then my name was all over the news, stating I had become the youngest female CEO in the country. The family reunion, when they saw me arrive in my Rolls-Royce, I used to think that if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. Not just as the youngest in the room, not just as the only daughter, but as someone worthy of carrying on the family name. My name is Eva Lancaster. And if you've ever heard of Lancaster & Sons, the luxury home design company that once dominated the East Coast, you already know my last name. What you probably don't know is that the sons in that title weren't just branding. It was a mission statement, a silent decree that said, "This empire is for the men." I spent most of my childhood on construction sites and in model homes, trailing behind my father and two older brothers like a shadow. While they got to hold blueprints and make decisions, I was handed clipboards and coffee. My suggestions were met with nods and patronizing smiles. I was ambitious, a word they use the same way you describe a puppy trying to climb stairs, but I never complained. I took every internship, every grunt job, every late-night shift they threw my way. I read every contract, studied the market, and knew the company's financials better than the CFO did. At 23, I was the only one in the family who had an MBA. At 24, I was running entire regional projects, but titles meant nothing if no one believed you deserved them. The first time I brought up succession planning at a board meeting, a simple suggestion to begin preparing for the next generation of leadership, my father didn't even let me finish my sentence. "You're not one of us, Eva," he said, loud enough for the room to freeze. The silence was thick. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't even look at me. He just kept flipping through his notes. "This business was built by men, run by men. You're talented, sure, but this isn't your lane. You don't have the instinct." My oldest brother chuckled from across the table. My mother stared at her hands. No one came to my defense. Not even my uncle, who had privately told me more than once that the company would be lucky to have me in charge someday. "You're emotional," my father added, like he was doing me a favor by explaining it. "You care too much about how people feel, not enough about how deals get done. That's not leadership, Eva. That's sentiment." I swallowed hard. That meeting was supposed to be a stepping stone. I had spent weeks preparing. My pitch included a 5-year growth projection, marketing insights, and a fully budgeted expansion plan into 3 new markets. But all they saw was a little girl playing dress-up at the big boys' table. Later that evening, as I sat in the office I technically ran but didn't officially hold the title for, my father walked in without knocking. "You know?" he said casually, like we were talking about the weather. "Your brothers aren't perfect, but they understand how to carry the Lancaster name. You were always more of a dreamer." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You mean someone with vision?" He narrowed his eyes. "I mean someone who thinks having ideas is the same as having power. Pathetic girl, you were never the smart one. You just worked harder to compensate." That line, I've never forgotten it. Pathetic girl, you were never the smart one. He left without another word, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. The office was dim, cold. But for the first time, I didn't feel like crying. I felt awake. If they wouldn't make room for me at the table, then fine. I'd build a better one. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't fight for scraps. I would walk away. And I would build something so undeniable, so powerful that one day they'd choke on their words. They didn't know it then, but that was the last time they'd ever speak to me like I was beneath them. They had written me off, but what they didn't realize was that I'd already started writing a story of my own. You'd think after everything my father said, I'd just leave quietly. Maybe I should have. But I was still holding on to hope that if I proved myself one more time with something undeniable, they'd finally listen. So I did what any pathetic girl who was never the smart one would do. I worked harder. I spent weeks refining a business proposal that could have taken Lancaster & Sons into a new era. I analyzed market trends, emerging demographics, and digital behavior shifts. I had found a niche eco-luxury homes with smart tech integration. No one on the East Coast was doing it right yet. It was the future, and I knew exactly how we could own it. I built an entire campaign around it, logo mock-ups, projections, brand story. I even pulled in contacts from my MBA network for consultation. I booked a small presentation room in our headquarters and sent out invitations to the executive team. I still remember the way my hands shook as I clicked through my slides. I still remember the way no one made eye contact, and I especially remember the way my father smiled at the end of it. Not a smile of pride or even amusement, but that tight-lipped smirk he reserved for people who didn't know their place. When I finished, there was a long silence. I looked to my brothers, both leaning back in their chairs like they were waiting for dessert. My uncle yawned, clearly checked out. My father was the only one who spoke. "Are you done?" he asked. I nodded, unsure. He exhaled sharply, then turned to my oldest brother Clark. "You want to explain to your sister why that would bankrupt us in a year?" Clark chuckled. "Eva, no offense, but this isn't grad school. You don't just throw buzzwords into a slideshow and call it a plan. Smart homes? Green building? Who do you think we're selling to? Elon Musk?" The room erupted in quiet laughter. "But it's not a joke," I said, heart pounding. "The numbers lie," my father cut in. "Instinct doesn't. And my instinct tells me this whole pitch is a vanity project. You want to play CEO? Fine. But not here. This is a real company, not your little sandbox. Dad, no. Listen," he said, standing now. "You want to build something? Do it somewhere else. Hell, start your own firm. See how far that gets you. But don't come in here acting like you're one of us because you're not. You never were." That word again, not one of us. I looked around the room waiting for someone to step in, anyone. But all I saw were smirks, stifled grins, and a few awkward glances. My mother wasn't even there. She rarely came to meetings anymore. I gathered my materials in silence. As I reached the door, my younger brother, Ryan, leaned forward with a smug grin. "Hey, if it doesn't work out, I hear there's an interior design company hiring. You could help them pick curtains." Another round of laughter. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't my family anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, or their colleague. I was an outsider wearing their last name like a label I hadn't earned. I didn't cry, not until I got home. And then I let it all out. The humiliation, the rage, the heartbreak, it came in waves. Years of being talked over, dismissed, and underestimated. Years of being told to be grateful for the scraps they tossed my way. I wanted to scream, to burn it all down, but I didn't. Instead, I packed a suitcase. I left the next morning without telling anyone. I walked out of that legacy, that suffocating expectation of being just enough but never too much. I walked away from the boardroom I was never truly invited into and into the unknown. I moved to a city where no one knew my last name, where I wasn't Ava Lancaster, the black sheep of a family empire, but just Ava, a woman with a plan, a vision, and nothing left to lose. And in that tiny apartment above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread every morning, I sat down with my laptop and opened a blank page. No logo, no boardroom, no smirks, just me, in the beginning of something they'd never see coming. There's something liberating about being underestimated. It gives you the gift of invisibility, and when you're invisible, no one sees you coming. In that tiny apartment with chipped paint on the windowsills and a water heater that coughed every time I showered, I built the foundation of something no one in my family would believe I was capable of. I didn't have their money, but I had something else: clarity. No more trying to prove myself to people who had already decided who I was. No more waiting for permission. I named the company Alara Designs, a nod to a star barely visible to the naked eye, orbiting silently in the background. Quiet, unnoticed, but powerful. The early days were brutal. I burned through my savings fast. I ate a lot of instant noodles and worked until dawn most nights. I pitched my services to small contractors, boutique developers, even homeowners building custom spaces. Most of them said no, but a few said yes, and I treated those projects like they were million-dollar accounts. I started small. Custom eco-smart renovations for high-end clients who wanted sustainable luxury. It was a niche, and I knew the demand was there. I handled every detail myself: drafting, sourcing, managing subcontractors. I wore every hat because failure wasn't an option. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to outperform them, and I wanted to do it on my own terms. Within a year, I had 5 full-time employees, a small studio space, and a growing client list. The business was still under the radar, not big enough to make headlines, but buzzing in the right circles. We kept things quiet on purpose. My family had no idea I was even still in the industry. What they couldn't realize, was that Alara wasn't just a new firm. It was competition. I kept a close eye on Lancaster and Sons. It wasn't hard. They were still making the news, still bragging about outdated models and ignoring shifts in buyer demand. They were coasting on their name like they always had, and they were blind to how fast the world around them was changing. So, I got strategic. I hired a marketing expert who used to work at a major competitor. We crafted a brand image that directly appealed to the clients my father had always brushed off. Young professionals, women-led households, tech-forward families who wanted design that felt personal and smart. Our style was clean, efficient, and sustainable. Everything Lancaster and Sons was not, but I didn't stop there. We started bidding quietly on mid-level commercial projects, some of the same contracts my father's company used to win without trying. Except now, they were losing to a no-name firm with fresh ideas and faster execution. They didn't know who we were, and I liked it that way. Behind the scenes, I started poaching some of their people, the good ones, the overlooked ones, project managers, designers, assistants who had stories just like mine. People who were tired of being invisible, people who wanted a seat at a table that actually had room for them. And one by one, they joined me. Our little star was growing brighter, and they still hadn't looked up. There was a moment about 18 months in when I sat in a meeting with a high-profile client. They were considering Lancaster and Sons or us. I'd seen my father's bid, safe, traditional, complacent, and then they looked at mine. "Who are you?" the client asked, scanning our proposal. "This is fresh. It's smart. It's what I didn't know I wanted until I saw it." I smiled. Just someone with a lot to prove. We got the deal. By the end of that quarter, we had outbid Lancaster and Sons on 3 major contracts, each one pulling them further out of their comfort zone. Their name didn't carry the weight it used to. Their charm was fading, and I was only just getting started. Still, I stayed quiet. Let them ignore me. Let them laugh in their boardrooms and mock the firm that kept beating them, unaware of who was behind it. Let them think I was gone, irrelevant, forgettable. Because by the time they finally realized who they were up against, it would already be too late. They say pride comes before the fall. But in my father's case, it was pride that built the fall, brick by arrogant brick. From the outside, Lancaster and Sons still looked like a polished empire. Big glass headquarters, shiny trucks with bold lettering, ads and glossy magazines. But inside, the foundation was starting to rot, and I could see it from a mile away. It started with a canceled contract, a resort development in Maine that they had been banking on. The client pulled out last minute, citing creative differences, but I knew the real reason. We'd offered a better vision, cleaner execution, and lower overhead. Then came the layoffs. At first, just a few junior designers, then the longtime receptionist, then a project lead I'd worked with years ago. A man so loyal, he practically bled Lancaster blue. When he reached out to me looking for a role, I didn't gloat. I just sent him the contract. Welcome to Alara. The real blow came 6 months later. Lancaster and Sons lost a government contract to retrofit eco-friendly buildings, a massive multi-year deal. One they'd been sure was theirs. One they hadn't even really fought for because they believed the Lancaster name still carried weight. But times had changed. Buyers wanted innovation, sustainability, flexibility, and Alara offered all 3. I watched their press release stumble through excuses, blaming market volatility and increased competition. They didn't name us, of course. They didn't know it was me. But they were beginning to feel us breathing down their necks. I could see it in the desperation. Their once polished social media presence started trying too hard, mimicking our branding, copying our hashtags, even launching a new modern eco initiative that felt rushed and tone-deaf. I almost laughed when I saw it. They were trying to beat a ghost, and the ghost was winning. Rumors started swirling in the industry. Whispers about mismanagement, family tension, poor cash flow. I didn't spread them. I didn't need to. I just let them fester. Truth has a way of leaking when people are afraid, and my family was starting to panic. One afternoon, I walked into a trade expo. I wasn't there as a speaker or exhibitor, just an observer. Someone curious to see how Lancaster and Sons would present themselves now that they weren't the biggest name in the room. They had a booth near the back, smaller than usual, fewer people. My father wasn't there, but Clark and Ryan were trying to smile through their unease. I stayed far enough away that they wouldn't notice me, just close enough to watch. A man approached them, a developer I'd met weeks prior during a pitch meeting. "Sorry, I'm already in talks with Alara," he said casually when Clark handed him a brochure. "They're doing some incredible work." Clark forced a smile. "Alara?" The man nodded. "You should check them out. They've got something special going on." And then he walked away. Clark's expression dropped like a mass hitting the floor. He turned to Ryan. "Who the hell is Alara?" I smiled to myself. The reckoning had begun. But the real moment, the turning point, came on a rainy Thursday morning. I was in my office going over expansion plans when my assistant knocked. "There's something you need to see," she said, eyes wide. She handed me a tablet with an open article. The headline read, "Lancaster and Sons faces major lawsuit over delayed projects and contract breach." It wasn't just a hit piece. It was an exposé. The article outlined missed deadlines, budget overruns, poor planning, and internal conflict, including anonymous sources from within the company, former employees, maybe even a few I had quietly welcomed to Alara. My father's empire was bleeding, and the world had just smelled it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just closed the article, leaned back in my chair, and took a long breath. This was never about revenge. It was about truth, about showing them and the world that I had never been the pathetic girl, that I wasn't emotional. I wasn't naive. I wasn't a dreamer playing dress-up in their world. I was a builder. And while they were busy mocking me, I was building a future without them. But what none of them expected was that future was about to be very public, because the world was about to learn my name, and so were they. There are moments that split your life in two, before and after. For me, it happened on a quiet Monday morning over black coffee and a buzzing phone I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of reviewing mock-ups for our latest project, a luxury green development outside of Seattle, when my assistant rushed in, her face pale and stunned. "Ava," she said breathlessly, holding out her phone. "You're trending." I blinked. "What?" She turned the screen toward me, and there it was. Ava Lancaster, youngest female CEO and the country founder of Alara Designs, revealed. My heart stopped. It wasn't just a business article. It was everywhere. CNN, Forbes, Business Insider. Even the morning news shows had picked it up. One headline stood out among the rest. The ghost founder, Alara CEO, revealed to be heiress of Lancaster and Sons, the company she quietly outmaneuvered. I didn't even have to read the article. I already knew the story they were telling. A girl exiled from her family business, mocked for her ambition, only to return with an empire of her own. There were quotes from old colleagues, clips from my keynote at a private tech conference, photos of me in front of Alara's newest HQ, sleek, glassy, minimalist, everything Lancaster and Sons wasn't. And then came the cherry on top, a side-by-side comparison of their latest losses and our recent wins. It wasn't subtle. The media had drawn the battle lines for us. My phone started ringing. Emails poured in, journalists, investors, congratulations from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But the message that hit me hardest wasn't from any of them. It was from my mother. One sentence. "Your father saw the news. He hasn't spoken in an hour." I stared at the screen, not out of guilt, not even satisfaction, just silence. For years, he had insisted I wasn't one of them. For years, I had believed that proving him wrong would fix something inside me. But in that moment, watching the world celebrate what he'd tried so hard to suppress, I realized something important. I didn't need his validation anymore. That same afternoon, my publicist confirmed the details. A televised interview had been requested. National coverage, prime time. "Do you want to do it?" she asked. I hesitated. I hadn't built Alara for the spotlight. I built it for freedom. But maybe it was time to take the mic. I nodded. "Let's do it." The interview aired 3 days later. I wore a deep navy suit, elegant, understated. No flashy logos, no revenge speeches, just presence. The host opened with the story of my mysterious rise, how Alara had become a quiet industry giant, redefining eco-luxury real estate in under 4 years. And then she asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Is it true that you're the daughter of Charles Lancaster?" I smiled gently. "Yes." "Why hide it?" "I didn't hide it," I said. I just stopped apologizing for not being welcome. She blinked. And now you've built a company that outperformed theirs. It's not about outperforming, I replied. Though we both knew it was. It's about building something that reflects who I am and giving others a place to do the same. The interview ended with a standing ovation from the live audience. That night, Alara's website crashed from the traffic. We received over 300 partnership inquiries. Our stock jumped 12% in 24 hours, and investors began whispering about a global expansion. But while the world celebrated my name, I knew there was one place where silence reigned. The Lancaster family group chat. Still active but eerily quiet. No snide comments, no dismissive emojis, just silence. Until one message finally appeared from my brother Clark. "You used us." I didn't reply. Not then. What could I say? They had used my silence to pretend I didn't exist. And now the world knew better. The announcement had changed everything, not because it gave me power, but because it forced them to see what they had spent a lifetime ignoring. Me, Eva Lancaster. The one they said would never lead, never succeed, never be more than a dreamer. And now I was the youngest female CEO in the country, but I still had one final step left, one final chapter, and it would begin at the family reunion. The invitation arrived like nothing had changed. A crisp ivory envelope with embossed lettering, Lancaster Family Annual Reunion, Saturday at 4 p.m., hosted at the estate. No personal note, no apology, just tradition. I stared at it for a while, letting the irony settle. 4 years ago, they laughed me out of boardrooms, told me I didn't belong, called me pathetic. Now they were inviting me back into the house I grew up in. The house that in every way had made it clear I was a guest, not a legacy. I hadn't set foot there since the day I left. But this year, I accepted. Not for them, for me. That Saturday, I pulled up to the estate gates in a sleek black Rolls-Royce, the ghost model. The name alone made me smile. Fitting, really, for the girl they had once erased. The guard recognized me immediately, eyes wide as he lifted the barrier. The long driveway was lined with luxury cars, BMWs, Audis, a classic Bentley or two, but mine was the only Rolls. I stepped out slowly in a tailored ivory suit. No logos, no dramatic flair, just quiet elegance, and the kind of presence that makes a room pause without needing to raise its voice. As I approached the entrance, the murmurs began. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. They all saw me. Finally saw me. But no one seemed to know what to say. I walked into the foyer like I belonged there because I did, whether they liked it or not. My mother was the first to greet me. Her eyes softened, and for a second, I saw something that almost looked like regret. "You look incredible," she whispered. "Thank you," I said, then leaned in. "Let's not pretend anything." She gave a small, sad smile. Fair enough. Inside, the party buzzed on. Cousins, uncles, old family friends. My brother stood near the fireplace, frozen mid-conversation when they spotted me. Clark's jaw tensed. Ryan's eyes flicked to my wrist, then the car keys in my hand. I didn't stop to greet them. I headed straight for the back patio where my father stood alone, gazing out over the lawn like a king surveying the ruins of his kingdom. He turned when he heard my heels on the stone. And for the first time in my life, Charles Lancaster looked small. We stood in silence for a moment. "You came," he finally said, his voice quieter than I remembered. "I did." He studied me. "You've made quite a name for yourself." I said nothing. He looked away. His voice strained. "Ava, I may have been wrong." That almost made me laugh. May have been? But I didn't come for apologies. I came for closure. He turned back toward me. "The company's struggling." "Your brothers?" He stopped himself. "We could use your help." I met his eyes, calm, steady, not angry anymore. Just clear. "You said I was never the smart one," I replied softly. "Just a pathetic girl with ideas and no power." He didn't deny it. "Now," I said, gesturing vaguely toward the house, the party, the dying empire, "you want my help?" His lips parted, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to rescue you, Dad. I built something without you. While you were mocking me, I was creating. While you were dismissing me, I was becoming everything you said I couldn't be." He looked at me like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. Good. I turned to leave. But before I did, I glanced over my shoulder. You were right about one thing, I said. I'm not like you, and thank God for that. As I walked back through the house, people parted like water around me. Whispers, stolen glances, a few forced smiles, but I didn't need their admiration. I wasn't there to prove anything anymore. I had already won. Outside, the Rolls-Royce gleamed under the late afternoon sun. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and looked back once. Not at the house, but at the little girl I used to be. The one who tried so hard to be seen. And I smiled, because she wasn't trying anymore. She was leading. And from that day on, the world would never forget her name. Eva Lancaster. Not the black sheep. Not the afterthought. Not the pathetic girl. Just the woman who rewrote the rules and made sure no one like her would ever be forgotten again.